So just to introduce our team, I'm Nancy, which you probably figured that one out by now. Lauryn Wild. You could say a few things about yourself.
Good morning. As I was introduced earlier, I am on the Instructional Quality Commission, but I also do what you do on the other end. I work in San Bernardino City Unified School District, which is down south, in the central office with curriculum development for secondary ELA. So we're in common company in this room.
And Carlos.
Good morning. I'm not Mike, so hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Carlos Ulloa. This is my second year on the commission. I'm an elementary principal in Loma at Ulloa School, K-6, and just really excited to be here this morning.
Thank you. Okay. So we have various versions of this. Somehow some of that should be moved over. But at any rate, you now have an understanding of this graphic. But what we're going to be concentrating on is this circle right here, content knowledge, and how that theme cuts across both the ELA standards and the ELD standards and literacy standards. So that is our frame. And here we have our graphic for how they all work together. So our goals for today, we are going to be sharing ideas and resources with you, and you will also be doing that sharing with one another and showing you how the framework supports the development of content knowledge across all subjects. So what we want you to go away with is knowing where things are and things that you can use back in your schools and districts. And so that we'll show you, and then you will know, and then you will go. You will be able to take this information back to apply to your lesson planning, instruction, and cross-content collaboration. This notion of collaboration and cross-content collaboration, you're going to hear over and over and over again. This is not just about our skill in teaching and in planning. This is about our skill in working with one another as adults. So that's critically important. You know, now this is my little commercial here. At the beginning, I had this fear that English teachers across the country implementing Common Core were going to go, finally, you crummy so-and-sos in science or, you know, wherever, you're going to have to help out with this literacy. Well, that's probably not going to go well, right? And the reality is we can't have this be where we're pitted against one another in different departments. We have to sort of literally join hands and work on this together to make it work for our students. So, jumping right in, we're going to define content knowledge. You all have one of those little colored sheets of paper. So what we want you to do, right away you're going to be getting up. You are going to read your own content knowledge quote, and it indicates what part of the framework it's from. And then you want to find a person who has a different quote on a different colored piece of paper. Make introductions, compare your quotes, and see if you can come up with a shared definition of content knowledge based on what your two quotes say. And then after you've done that, find a new partner. Let's see how many different quotes you can look at together with another. So we will call time at some point and bring you back together. But we will just get you started. So remember, the first thing is find someone with another colored piece of paper, and we do expect you to get up and move around. So ahas, what are some themes that emerged for you? Anyone like to just share one? Yes?
Reading wide variety of text, including the specific discipline of the course as well as others that may pertain to it?
Yes, absolutely. Other ahas, other things that emerged for you? Yes?
We saw the interconnection between the ELA standards and the content knowledge going both directions.
Yes.
So that the content knowledge is enhanced by having the academic language from the ELA, and yet backward the other way by addressing that in context and the language arts then in this sense.
Absolutely. That reciprocity is so critical. Anything else? So you've identified really key elements that we tried to communicate across the grade level chapters and as well as in Chapter 2 relative to content. First of all, students are reading widely. And I would say they're writing widely, they're experiencing and viewing texts, but a range of texts, independent, in-school reading, a variety of disciplines. So that's one of the crucial notions you'll see. Of course, if we were talking about lower grades, we'd be talking about a lot of read-alouds, but here we're really talking about students doing a lot of reading on their own. That building content knowledge is a collaborative effort across disciplines. And I think most of us would jump to the idea that this is mainly an adult issue. You know, these are teachers working together, but I think it's also students working together across disciplines and in doing projects that involve more than one discipline. And being made aware of how things connect. But collaborative learning is a hallmark of much of what we do. Not that they won't do independent work, they will do that as well. Key here is that content includes literature. You know, early on in the Common Core, it was like, oh, literature's been banned, everything's informational text, I'm not allowed to ever have my kids read a novel again. That's not true. And in fact, in the framework, we talk about how by grade 12, 70% of the texts will be informational. But that's across all subjects, right? So, yes, there will be informational text within ELA. That's important, but literature is vitally important. And research across all areas. And, of course, that content knowledge growing from students' knowledge of language, ability to use vocabulary, grammatical structures, and discourse patterns to accomplish disciplinary goals. So if I were to explain this from a rhetorical perspective, I would say, what is our purpose? What is it we're trying to accomplish? How are we using language for that purpose in this particular content area? So these are the major themes that you will see addressed and in fact, these are the sections that you see in both. Chapter 6 is grades 6 through 8, Chapter 7 is grade 9 through 12, and there are sections under disciplinary literacy, which you'll get a chance to think about a little bit more later on in this session. Engaging with literature and informational text in all content areas, engaging in research, and planning for wide reading. So those are the 4 key elements. It's not the only thing, of course, but those are the ones that we call out in various sections within the content knowledge theme across the grade level chapters. So with that little introduction, I'm going to hand this over to Lauryn.
Great. And when we were thinking about this session and what it could look like, our task was really to get you into the framework as deeply as possible so that you can really take it back. And our kind of, know, go, share, show acronym that we tried to make it sound really interesting is so that you'll be engaging in some of the things that we're talking about and that we're modeling the framework. We're not just here, presenting and being the sage on the stage and giving you information, but that you're actually interacting with this information. So keeping that in mind, we're going to be doing kind of an expert group situation that will turn into a carousel where you will be able to deeply get into the framework and also collaborate with one another and be able to share your expertise and apply this to bring it to light. How are you using, focusing on content area and these 4 areas that Nancy just went over? How is this being illuminated at your sites and in your districts, and what are the areas where you say, this is where we're going to maybe dig in next? So with that, you have on your quote, if you look at the top, there is a number followed by a letter. So it might say 1A or 2B, etc. This is going to be really important in just a second for how we're going to group you. So knowing those directions, you'll want to follow along with me. All of you are going to be assigned to one of the 4 corners. So 1s are going to be over here, that's understanding disciplinary literacy. 2s, 3s, and then 4s in the front. Okay, so at least hopefully you mentally figured out which corner you're going to. Now, we're going to be dividing you further in those groups by having you one group focus on middle school for that focus area and one group focus on high school. This is the point if you are a middle school person in just a second and you had a B, because Bs are going to be high school, As are going to be middle school. If you wanted to quickly talk to people around you and swap that out, that's fine. When we divided the groups, we just kind of want to make sure there's a balance, but we also want to make sure that you're getting to really get into the framework in the area that matters to you. So we want to make sure that you have that option in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide into these 4 groups, and if you're visual, you can kind of see where you're going. So we have, again, I mentioned understanding disciplinary literacy, engaging in the content, engaging with literature, engaging in research will be in the back, and then up front here will be planning for wide reading. And so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to meet your people that will have your same letter and number, and there's going to be folders at each corner that have excerpts of the framework. So we've given you some reading material to do. It's not a lot. Some of you do have a little bit longer excerpts than others, so you might want to make some close reading decisions if you're going to do that, or if you're going to do some skimming as a group. You might decide to get into a little circle and kind of, read together, or you might say, let's kind of go on our own and take a couple minutes and then come back. However you want to do it as a group is up to you. But ultimately, what you're going to be doing is learning about your section, your focus area, from the framework itself. And then you're going to make a poster with your group. So you've noticed that we've had these chart papers strategically placed with markers. There's 3 things that we want you to see that are evidenced on your poster. We want you to talk about what is this focus area? And more importantly, how is content knowledge being accessed through this focus area? So what does content knowledge look like in disciplinary literacy? What does it look like in wide reading? So that's kind of your first goal. You're kind of summarizing those important parts, understanding your focus area through the framework, and then going that step and really discussing how is content knowledge accessed through this focus area. And then the other thing we'd like to see on your chart paper is what are some applications for teaching and learning? What does wide reading look like? We've had a lot of ideas about this over the years. So what is the framework really giving us some guidance about? And then the other thing we want you to do is this is where we want you to come to the table and share with us what are resources, what are ideas, what are ways that you are accessing content knowledge through these focus areas in your own district. In our last session in San Diego, we had people share websites and resources and say, oh, this is a wonderful place where kids can go and research and post their presentations online. This is where we want you to join in the conversation. And you'll also see that there are some resources suggested in the framework as well, so you can pull those out. After you create these posters, okay, kind of hitting on those 3 things, and we'll keep this slide up while you're working so that you kind of can reference it. After that, you're going to choose one person to stay with your poster and be a spokesperson, and then we're going to do a rotation. Now, you're only going to rotate through your grade level area, so you'll see if you're a middle school person, you'll just go to the middle school posters. If you're a high school person, you'll go see the high school posters. And so through that rotation, you're going to get a deep understanding of each one of those focus areas, and then we're going to come back and kind of reflect on how this ties together. So by the end of the session, you'll deeply engage in one, but then you'll have an opportunity to really hear what your colleagues have learned throughout the framework as well. And by the time you'll leave, you'll have some really great ideas. And last time we did this, people were taking pictures of their posters and networking, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. We want you to have something tangible that you can take and put into action. So time-wise, we're going to say that we're going to give you approximately 10 to 15 minutes to get into your group, to read your excerpt, and to put together your poster. We would like to start rotations a little, if we can, before 11 o'clock, so we can have some time afterwards to debrief. But we'll be checking in with you. So kind of shoot for that 10 to 15 minute mark. We don't want to rush you as you're doing your learning, but we do want to make sure that we're managing our time. And then after we kind of check in. I will do my hand signal because I know this is a social group. So look for my hand, and then when we raise our hands, then I'll give you instructions about how we're going to rotate through. Okay? And like I said right now, as we're rotating and going to our groups, if you do want to switch with someone so that you can get a middle school or a high school assignment, then that's fine. So we'll go ahead and move to our groups, and we'll begin. And again, we apologize for interrupting your wonderful collaboration and discussion. Every time we've done this, we realize that we could spend a whole day just doing this and reading the framework and getting into it, but we want to make sure that we honor the time for the session and also have an opportunity for you to share your expertise that you've gained in the few minutes we just had with others. So what we're going to do is we've asked everybody to have a spokesperson that's going to present. The way the presentations will work is you'll get about a minute to a minute and a half to share your information. Yes, we know that you have a lot of information, but kind of be succinct. If there's time, you can just take a couple of questions, and then we'll rotate. So we're going to look to rotate every 3 minutes. Okay, so those of you presenting, kind of keep it in your mind, and we're going to try to keep it moving. You're only going to rotate to your grade level area. So you'll notice in the four corners there's always a middle school poster and a high school poster. If you're a middle school person, you'll only go to the middle school poster. So you're not rotating through 8 cycles, or 6 cycles. You're just doing your 3. Okay, so you'll hit each of those 4 focus areas. So go ahead and take about 30 seconds. Make sure you have someone in your group who's staying behind, who knows how to share your information. You might either be volunteered or voluntold. Okay, so groups, say goodbye to your teammates. The experts stay behind and go ahead and rotate. We'll rotate around the room this way. As we come together, now that you're maybe coming back with some of your school partners or district partners that you might have been separated from, we want you to just take 1 to 2 minutes to pick just one of these reflection questions. And you certainly just experienced a lot of information. You learned a lot of new things. You're probably, your brain is probably generating some ideas for how you might want to take this back and share. But pick out one of these questions. Maybe there was some strategies that you really liked or some resources. Maybe you had an aha when it came to one of these focus areas related to content knowledge. Just with your partner, decompress a little bit. What is one thing that you want to take back or reflect on, or maybe a new learning based on diving into the framework with the exercise that we did? Okay, so just take a couple of minutes to unpack that. Okay, we're going to ask you to come back together. And we do have to thank you. You may have noticed we were a little sneaky. You didn't know when you were coming to this session that you were going to actually be the presenters. But hopefully you took through this the spirit of the Common Core and the framework and how we're really transforming education by making everybody active participants and learners. And it was amazing as me and my colleagues were walking around the groups, hearing things that you guys analyzed that we never could have even thought of to present, and the graphics and the visuals and how you're making sense of the framework. We want this to be a living document. We want it to be something that you're able to dip into, and we know that it might seem a little overwhelming because of the size, but hopefully you've realized by kind of being able to pull out some of these focus areas, there's a lot in there to help guide some of that rich discussion. But we also wanted to make it practical for you. And so now we're going to talk about what are the ways that we can take this conversation about content knowledge and the things that you've learned and help you either in your own classrooms or as that you're training teacher leaders at your sites to now make this go into action. How do we take the philosophy and really integrate it into something that's practical? So Nancy's going to kind of share with us a little bit about a handout that everybody should have right in front of them.
So you have a half sheet called Framing Questions for Lesson Planning, and Pam did go over this a bit in our overview. Really, as you look at the content, then these questions are designed for you to really look at the standards and think about what it is, take issues of formative assessment, and apply these. So what we'd like you to do is just for 1 minute, think about how these, take a look at these, and with an elbow partner, just talk about how these guiding questions could help you create lessons that engage students with content knowledge. So that, I know that wasn't enough time to deeply analyze these questions. However, are there any initial reactions or ahas about these? Yes.
You can kind of look at the framing questions as a template for a lesson plan as you go through. I know from our teachers in particular, we have certain expectations for each lesson plan, and as I'm reading the questions, I can kind of pinpoint where each question will go within the lesson. So this is just another way of looking at it as a template.
Right, right. Anything else?
Well, I'd like ask maybe a follow-up question to what language might be new for students, or present challenges in terms of thinking about like what's the cultural load of the language, what's the linguistic load of the language, what's the content.
In fact, some of the work you do in text complexity could really be examined here and go into the general framing questions for all students and then applied for English learners, right? So there are a lot of ways you can take this. Some people wanted us to create a lesson planning format that we would give you, and we resisted that because we think that's pretty individual, and we think that, you know, here's the big difference here is that you're not dealing with one standard at a time. You know, as Pam likes to say, it's a many-to-many correspondence. And so how do you, and cognitively that's more difficult for teachers. So that's why we came up with these framing questions. The other little piece here for me is that this is not only going to require a lot of thinking and planning for individual units, it's going to require a lot of thinking and planning across the entire year, semester, quarter, all disciplines. Where are these research projects going to take place? Where are the writing projects going to take place? Where do the opportunities to present, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Critical that we work collaboratively with our colleagues to make this happen. So you can think of these questions kind of at the micro level, and then you can think of them at the macro level in terms of your department and your entire school and district. So that's just a couple things to pique your thinking, and I would like to turn this over to Carlos.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I think I'm mic now. So raise your hand if you like to use your smartphone to take pictures. Okay, raise your hand if you have no memory on your smartphone because you've taken so many pictures. I have 20,000 pictures, and I'm trying to transfer them to my iMac, and my computer keeps crashing every time I do it. So I'm waiting to upgrade it in a week, right? More memory. So I'm going to talk about snapshots. And really, in designing the framework, the snapshots were meant to really give you a moment in time. A snapshot in your room may look different than my classroom. And so just know that. So you may read the snapshot, it's like, no, this is not how I would do it. It's not meant to be how you would do it or how another person would do it. It's just to give you a picture. Just like when I take a picture may be different from the way you take a picture, the way you see it. We may both be looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, but my shot is going to look a little bit different than your shot. So just know that the snapshot is meant to really give that moment in time. We also have the vignettes that paint a broader picture. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is at your table, you're going to discuss and talk about that snapshot and how that snapshot really demonstrates these standards that we were looking at. So which of the 4 focus areas were illustrated in looking at the carousel that we did? And what are some of the instructional resources or strategies or ideas from this snapshot that you can utilize in your own teaching? Once again, it's a snapshot. It's not meant to be the whole lesson. It's not meant to be the whole unit or the whole year. And then Do you see evidence of the framing for questions for planning in this snapshot? How would that look like? So we're going to take a few minutes to do that. So at your table. All right, I don't mean to cut you off. Raise your hand if you'd love to look at family pictures. I do. Snapshot really is meant to give you a picture of that moment in time. We highly, highly encourage you to use the snapshots, take them back to your district, but know that it's not the ending point, it's a starting point. It's an opportunity to have a discussion. So your snapshot will look different. Your vignettes will look different, but we want you to use them. So just know that you will see snapshots throughout the framework, and you will also see the vignettes. So snapshot, smaller, vignette, much larger. I'm going to turn over the mic to Deborah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, to kind of reflect, and Carlos said it wonderfully, we've given you, as we realize, in a small amount of time, a lot of tools, but again, this is your lens to, as you go back, what is it that we could use to really make this learning practical? And so we wanted to model a situation where you could just kind of take one of those focus areas, have your staff or your district get into learning about it, but then really, how does this connect with teaching and learning? That is why we're here. You know, how do we take this philosophy of the framework into practice? So hopefully, again, our last bullet point is we want you to go and be able to use this effectively as we do what's best for kids.